Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Shannon Fern, and I'll be moderating the webinar. I have just a few logistical items to go over before we get started today. First, as you exit the webinar, at the end, there will be a short survey. Please take the time to fill out the 3-question survey. It'll just take you 2 minutes. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's webinar and get your input for upcoming webinars. And the second item is we will have a short time for Q&A at the end of the webinar today. To submit a question, you will see a questions pane on your screen. Just go ahead and type your question into the questions pane, and we will get to as many as we possibly can before the end of our time today. So with all of that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Lisa Walberg with LiveWell, Colorado.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you everyone for being here today. We want to spend a little bit of time talking with you about how we are going to go about implementing House Bill 11-1069, the physical activity expectations in schools. The objectives of today's call are threefold. First, to ensure that everyone has a clear understanding of what the bill does and does not require schools to do. The second thing is to identify ways to engage in implementing the bill in your local community. We know that we have a broad range in our audience of community members, parents, teachers, LiveWell coordinators, and people within local and state agencies. So we are thrilled to have all of you on board, and everyone has different roles to play in supporting the implementation of this bill. And the third thing is to connect you to useful resources for increasing physical activity in schools. This one is going to be, we're going to hit on a little bit less than the other two objectives, and plan on doing a second call where we can really dig in and provide you even more specifically around the resources that are available. So quickly, the presenters today include myself, as well as Kyle Legleiter, who is the Physical Activity Coordinator for the State Department of Public Health and Environment. And Kyle has played an instrumental role in providing us with background information as we went through the passage of this bill, and really driving a team to look at how we can be effective in implementing the bill. Of course, it's always nice and a great success to celebrate when we pass legislation, but the real magic is when we implement it the way that it was intended. So thank you to Kyle for his leadership in that. And Stephanie Wasserman is the Health and Wellness Program Director at the Colorado Legacy Foundation, and she interfaces directly with schools to actually bring that magic to life as well. So we're thrilled to have both of them participating in the call today. So just thought we'd start with that celebratory piece of it. This is a bill that was passed, and it was great to see the number of school children that had an opportunity to participate in the bill signing ceremony. This bill was sponsored by Representative Tom Massey and Representative Rhonda Fields and Senator Aguilar, and they put a lot of work into making sure that we had a bill that could be passed. There have been several efforts at moving physical activity or physical education into the schools across Colorado, and so this is a first success that we are thrilled to be able to celebrate. So a little background as to why we need to focus on physical activity. According to the 2009 Child Health Survey that was conducted by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, 1 in 4 Colorado children is overweight or obese, and only 53% meet the daily physical activity requirements. So ensuring access to physical activity in elementary schools is something that we believe will combat childhood obesity and improve Colorado's kind of rankings. We, while we're the leanest state for adults, we have dropped precipitously in a short period of time from 3rd to 23rd leanest among our children, and that is our future adult population. So it is something that we need to address soon and address with some real oomph. Physical activity in schools, we also know, does more than just reduce obesity and provide for health. There are a lot of more substantial benefits and outcomes. We, through research, know that it increases academic achievement, it reduces behavioral problems, and improves students' physical and mental health. So we see schools as playing an instrumental role in addressing childhood obesity overall, physical activity being a key piece of it. when you consider that roughly 10% of Colorado's population is in public elementary schools, it's a real targeted way in which we can address a big piece of our population. We also know that kids are spending the majority of their waking hours in school during the school year, so it's also a place in which kids are spending a lot of time. Unfortunately, we also know that a third of our Colorado children live in neighborhoods without a park, playground, trail, recreation center, or other safe place to play. So the time that they're not in school, many of them don't have access to the physical activity that's so important to their health and well-being. And schools can provide that safe place. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle to talk about some of the background to the bill and what the bill is telling us.
Great. Thank you for that background, Lisa. And for everyone else on the phone, we want to provide a little bit more background for you of what the policy landscape in Colorado looked like prior to the passage of House Bill 11-1069 earlier this year. Before this year, Colorado was one of only 2 states in the country that had no statewide requirements for either physical education or physical activity in schools at any grade level. As a result of House Bill 11-1069 passing, that is no longer the case. Colorado now has some standards for elementary schools only for physical activity, and we'll explain shortly what those actual standards are and what those requirements of schools are. At the local level, the Colorado Children's Campaign did a study in 2010 of the 23 largest school districts in the state and their physical activity policies. In that study, the Children's Campaign found that only one of the 23 largest school districts in the state had a physical activity policy that actually required the schools provide a specific number of minutes of physical activity opportunities to their students during the school day. So even at the local level, there wasn't much policy protecting students' time to be active during the school day in Colorado before this bill. But also at the same time, there was a wide recognition across the state that physical activity is good for students, it's good for schools, it's good for health, and it's also good for academic achievement. The Colorado Health Foundation did a poll of Colorado adults a few years ago, and they found that 86% of Colorado voters supported increasing physical activity time during the school day. So this is something that had broad community support from across the state as well. So as we mentioned, House Bill 11-1069 passed through the state legislature and was signed into law by the governor earlier this year. It establishes a minimum time requirement for physical activity opportunities in elementary schools. The actual number of minutes that elementary schools are required to provide to all of their students varies by the student's schedule as well as the school schedule. So there's basically 4 different requirements that schools may have to meet depending on what type of schedule they have and how often the students are in schools. If you are a school district that meets 5 days per week, full-day students have to have access to physical activity opportunities for 600 minutes every month. If you are a half-day student in that 5-day-a-week school district, you have to have 300 minutes of physical activity opportunities each month. For schools that meet fewer than 5 days a week, and we know that there are several school districts in Colorado that meet only 4 days a week, their requirements are slightly different. For their full-day students, they have to have 30 minutes every day of physical activity, and their half-day students have to have 15 minutes every day of physical activity. One thing that's important to note is that many school districts across the state are already doing this. They are already providing physical activity opportunities above and beyond this minimum requirement, and that's great. Passage of this bill doesn't necessarily have to change what they are doing. But for some school districts that may not be meeting these minute requirements in their schedules right now, they may need to make some adjustments to their schedules in order to comply with the law. It's also important to note that this law establishes a minimum standard of physical activity time. Schools are welcome and encouraged to go above and beyond these amounts of physical activity for their schedules and for their students. One other thing to note about the physical activity law is that it provides a great deal of flexibility for local school districts and local schools across the state. We recognize that in Colorado, one size definitely does not fit all, so the lawmakers who put together this bill tried to make it flexible and easy for schools to implement with their existing resources so it wouldn't be a burdensome thing for them to do. The definition of physical activity is quite broad. It includes recess, physical education classes, fitness breaks, classroom activities that include physical activity, exercise programs, and field trips that include physically active components to them. Schools may meet the the minimum minute requirement of physical activity for their students with any combination of things from this list. So, for example, a 5-day-a-week school district who has students meeting for a full day has a 600 minutes per month requirement according to this law. They could meet the requirement by providing 400 minutes of recess and 200 minutes of physical education classes, and that would satisfy the requirements of this law. They could also do it through some other combination thereof. One thing that you should note is that the easiest way for school districts to ensure that all students have access to the minimum number of minutes of physical activity during a school day is through things that build it into student schedules on a regular basis, things like recess and physical education classes. If schools are not offering recess and physical education classes in the amount sufficient to meet the minimum minute standard for this law, then they need to ensure that all classroom activities or teachers are providing an adequate amount of physical activity breaks and other things for their students so that every student has that opportunity on a consistent basis. The next steps for school districts and local schools following the passage of this statewide policy is implementing policies at the local level. One of the first things that the law requires schools to do is for local school districts to develop and implement and adopt a local physical activity policy for their school district. In school districts, the School District Board of Education is responsible for developing and adopting this policy. In institute charter schools, the School Accountability Committee is also required to consult with the institute charter school in developing and adopting this policy. The Colorado Association of School Boards will be developing draft language and model policies for local school districts later this summer that will be available to school boards across the state. Local school boards may look at these model policies developed by the Association of School Boards and add to them, customize them, or edit them in order to meet their local needs if necessary. So school board members obviously have a key responsibility in the next steps of implementing this physical activity law. They are responsible for adopting the new physical activity policy for their school districts. The law also encourages school boards to consult with their accountability committees as well as their school wellness committees to solicit their feedback on what this physical activity policy should look like and how they can implement it within their school sites. School boards will also have an ongoing responsibility for ensuring accountability for implementation and compliance with the law. So they will be the ones ultimately responsible for ensuring that local schools and the school sites within their district are meeting the requirements of this new law. However, school boards are not alone in implementing this new policy, and there is a role that many other people in communities and schools can play in assisting school boards and other partners in implementing physical activity in schools, and that's what Stephanie Wasserman will talk to you about next.
Hi, thank you. The Colorado Legacy Foundation is just really pleased to be a partner in helping school districts adopt and implement House Bill 1069. And just so you know, our website at colegacy.org has best practices information around implementing physical activity strategies in school districts. We support school districts also through mini incentive grants around health and wellness, and we also convene stakeholders both regionally and across the state in supporting health and wellness strategies. So please visit our website to learn more about the Colorado Legacy Foundation. And as you know, in order to both adopt and implement House Bill 1069, there are many different stakeholders that have a key role in making sure that House Bill 1069 gets implemented with fidelity. And before we go into the individual roles, I just think that everybody who supports health and wellness can serve as an ambassador to messaging the importance of 1069. And I think both Kyle and Lisa addressed some of those important messages about how 1069 supports academic outcomes, including improved performance on standardized tests, things like attendance, participation, and enthusiasm for academic subjects. But really, a very important message for everyone is that this new law can help school districts meet the updated state academic content standards, not just for physical education, but also by reinforcing other subject areas such as math and reading. An important message, for example, is that dribbling a ball in a specific pattern helps students learn patterns in math, and things like juggling and catching and striking a moving object improves reading skills because students must master the ability to visually track objects. So there's important messages that all stakeholders can convey to make sure that 1069 is implemented with fidelity. So this slide shows basically the different stakeholders that all have a role, and in order for the law to be successful, everybody has to play their part in supporting it. The individual policies will only be as strong as the local community's accountability. So in terms of the next step for local schools, they'll just need to look at their school practices and align them with the district policies for the 2011-2012 school year. So basically, schools need to assess the amount of time students have opportunities for physical activity in their current schedule. And for those that schools and districts that are out of compliance with the new law, they'll need to look at different ways and opportunities to increase the amount of physical activity time if necessary. But also this is an opportunity for those that are already doing what the law requires or going beyond that. It's an opportunity to improve the quality of physical activity time for schools and districts. Next slide, please. So for schools and districts that have wellness coordinators, it's a great opportunity to collaborate with school board members and accountability committees. It's an opportunity, as I said, to do some messaging with school executives, teachers, and staff about the new policy. It's also a chance to coordinate school and district-wide efforts to implement the policy, and then to be able to connect to resources to increase the quantity and improve the quality of physical activity. And also the other message is that it can be linked to the importance of other school-wide health, school and district health efforts around things like health education, recess before lunch, and safe routes to schools activities. So it's a way to have one more strategy around a comprehensive approach to addressing health and wellness in your school and district. For principals, typically they are responsible for student scheduling, so they will have an important role in looking at the school-wide scheduling and being able to figure out ways to incorporate, whether it's just through recess or through also physical education. They'll have to assess the current amount of physical activity time offered to students and make adjustments as necessary, and then make sure that all students have a minimum amount of physical activity time during the school day. And one important policy to look at is your disciplinary policy. If schools are still using the removal of recess as a consequence for poor behavior, this might be a great opportunity to remove that policy, because this new law applies to all students, not just those that are well behaved. So this is a great opportunity for principals to look at that policy. In terms of teachers, it's a great opportunity to connect with resources that are out there to improve the quality of physical activity during the day. And one strategy is to actually offer classroom activity breaks on a regular basis. There's a lot of examples out there of ways to integrate physical activity into the school day. For example, there's Aurora Public School is starting a brand new strategy called Project 3R, which stands for Relevancy, Rigor, and Relationship of Physical Activity, which incorporates physical activity within the curriculum content of the school day. So it's an opportunity for physical education teachers to work with core curriculum classes to align and integrate physical education assessment tools into core classes such as math, science, and writing. So there's some really exciting examples out there that can be shared among teachers on how to implement this. And also they're available online, both on our website and other resources that we'll talk about at the end of the webinar. And again, that rewards in the classroom should be the disciplinary consequences of removing recess is something that teachers can also look at, as well as principal, in terms of rewarding good physical activity behaviors. In terms of parents and community advocates, it's a great opportunity to attend a school board meeting, participate in an accountability committee, and school wellness team meetings to express your support. Also available on our website are new promotional tools about the new standards. That there's really wonderful one-page documents and PowerPoint slides that community members can use to advocate with their school board members and their accountability committees on why physical activity and the new standards for physical education are so important. They could request information about how schools are implementing the new physical activity policies. They could volunteer to offer resources and support, and they could also link to other community health efforts. This is an important piece of the accountability aspect to this law. If schools are not held accountable, the policies will not be implemented with fidelity, and they will not be effective. I'd now like to turn this back to Kyle.
So one of the things that we wanted to do and that we're committed to doing is walking the talk. So just as we talk about how physical activity is great for students and great to incorporate it into the classroom time and the school day, we wanted to sort of give you an example of how easy it is to actually do this and how it can be fun and beneficial for adults to do as well. So if you think back to that list of types of physical activity that schools can count towards satisfying this requirement, physical activity breaks during the school day was one of those, and so we'd like to demonstrate very quickly for you how to do a physical activity break. The one that we'll be doing today is called inches, feet, and yards. So I'd like to ask everyone who's participating on the webinar to stand up and take a few steps back from their desk. Ideally, if you have space for it wherever you are, you'll be in a place where you have a couple of feet of open space around you in any direction. So once you get into that position, move your chair out of the way and all that too. Give yourself a little time to stretch and enjoy standing up for a minute. And then what I want you to do is, when I say inches, take your right foot and tap it about an inch in front of you. When I say feet, take your foot and tap it a foot in front of you. When I say yard, take a big step with your foot in front of you. All right, so now those are the basic instructions of what we're going to be doing. I'm going to mix it up a little bit now, so I'll give you either an inch, a foot, or a yard, as well as a direction. So if I say inch back, you'll tap your foot 1 inch behind you. If I say foot to the left, you'll move your foot and take a step 1 foot to the left. If I say yard forward, you'll take a big giant step forward. All right. So let's get ready to move. Let's start with a foot to the right, a yard back, inch to the left, foot forward, inch to the right, yard back, foot to the left, yard to the right, inch forward, foot forward, foot back, inch right, yard left, and last one giant foot forward. All right, very good. I hope that felt like a nice game of Twister for you. Before you sit down, just sort of go ahead and stretch your arms up above your head, stretch your upper body too. And then we're going to get back to work. So hopefully that was easy and fun for you to do and something that you could take and implement in classrooms if you ever have that opportunity, or if you're an adult in the working world like myself, feel free to use that in meetings as well.
Kyle had fun watching a room full of LiveWell Colorado going through those exercises, so thank you.
Now I'm going to hand it back over to Stephanie now.
We're just going to take a moment to talk about resources that are available, and these are live links. So is that right? They're live links? Not on the webinar. Oh, sorry. We'll post them on our website. That was wrong. basically, Kyle has done a great job of putting together an FAQ sheet that has all the information on what is included in 1069, as well as some information on resources and messaging. Also, the National Association for Sport and Physical Education has some great tools and resources around how to implement physical activity in the classroom as well as curriculum. And then the Coalition for Activity and Nutrition to Defeat Obesity, Can Do, has a lot of links to local resources, including order forms for the products from the Healthy Kids Club of the Poudre Valley Health Systems. And then the LiveWell Toolbox provides information on childhood obesity and school wellness and links to resources for physical education. And also, just a final plug for the Colorado Legacies website. It's colegacy.org. We have information on best practices as well as tips and promotional tools for the new standards. Finally, we want to talk about some potential funding sources to help implement 1069. The Colorado Health Foundation has 2 initiatives currently that could support work around implementing 1069. One is their PE Quality Improvement Grant, and the second is their Active Play Area Grant Initiative. So I encourage you to go on the website to learn more about these 2 different opportunities. And then in addition, the Colorado Legacy Foundation has, we call them mini innovation grants to support different strategies around health and wellness. We did just finish an open request for proposals in a competitive round of grants that were awarded to 6 school districts, but please stay tuned for additional opportunities that would be available to support this work, and you can learn more about that on our website. So turn it back over to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Even when we're sitting in the room, we don't always get our transitions right over time. So it's nice because I think there's so many partners that have been working on this that we can all speak for each other. A lot of the time, it's not always clear where the transition should happen because we're so integrated in this work. So thank you guys again for the great content in this webinar. As a reminder, as Shannon said, if you've got any questions, now's the time to put them in the question field on the webinar, and we will get to those. And I think, Shannon, we can also open it up for questions if people want to ask them live. Does that work or no?
Yes, if people do want to ask them live, you do have to be called in on a telephone, selecting telephone as your audio option. And then on your screen, you will also see a little place where you can raise your hand. So if you raise your hand, we'll call on you so that you can ask your question live.
So I'll give everybody a chance to get your questions formulated and continue with our thank yous, really to the legislative sponsors. Representative Tom Massey was so passionate about this bill and has been working towards improving physical activity in schools and working with schools to make sure it could happen. So we really appreciate that. Rhonda Fields is a new representative and jumped right in there with Tom and has really driven a lot of the enthusiasm behind this. And then Senator Aguilar on the Senate side, we really appreciate her leadership as well. And it really couldn't have happened without I couldn't list all of the organizations here who participated in either getting the legislation drafted, some of the background information, getting some of the players aligned and understanding that we can be successful in this work. As I think Kyle mentioned, there's so much that's on the plates of our schools right now and a lot of pressure. We don't want this to be one more thing. We needed them to understand how it's important and how it could actually help other things that they're trying to accomplish with our kids. So they really appreciate all the effort that has gone into this, both in getting it passed and now in the successful implementation. So we've received a couple of questions. I'm going to read them out and give Kyle and Stephanie an opportunity to answer them. And the first is, what percentage of Colorado schools have wellness coordinators? And Stephanie, you want to give that one a stab?
That's a great question. It's one of those things that unfortunately changes year to year based on budgetary issues, especially at the school level. So there isn't a really good way to get a handle on that number. But in terms of district-level wellness coordinators, I would say across the state there's probably close to 40. But at the school level, there's many, many more. There's a total of 178 school districts. But in terms of how many school-level wellness coordinators there are, they're often people that wear multiple hats. We don't have a good handle on that.
Good, thanks. Yeah, in terms of trying to get this information and the message out, we've used some pretty broad distribution. So if you all know of people and networks, please share the awareness of this, and it will. Another person asked, is this presentation going to be available on the LiveWell website? It absolutely will be. It will also be on the Legacy Foundation, and it will be, I believe, on the Public Health Association's website. And I anticipate we have other partners who will also want to post it, along with the links to different materials. So do share this with your colleagues and others that you believe can be an advocate for this work. The second question, is the new school district policy meant to be separate from the district wellness policy, or is it meant to be combined with current district wellness policy? Kyle?
So the law actually does not require one way or the other where this new physical activity policy lives within the overall book of a district's policy. So that's something that local school districts will be able to decide what the best home within their overall policies for this new physical activity policy might be. The law does encourage school districts and school boards to consult their district accountability committees as well as their school wellness committees as they're developing this new policy. So those stakeholders and that sort of public input process could be a great opportunity to engage your school board and other people in your community in that conversation of what is the best home and where should this really live within the overall scope of the district's policies, where it will get noticed, where people will remember that it's there and it will be actually implemented, and schools will remain in compliance with the law.
Okay, I'm going to jump to one of the questions that was just put in that I'm guessing somebody might have joined late, and I know that there were a couple of folks who did, with the question of has the bill already passed, and if so, when it was passed. Yes, this bill was passed. It's now, so there's a difference between passing the bill, which says something has to change, and then actually implementing the bill. So the first step was getting the bill passed, which happened during this past legislative session and was signed into law by Governor Hickenlooper with a lot of support. So now what we're talking about now is how you implement it. So the specific policies are determined by each district, or in the case of charter schools, within the confines of that charter school. So that's probably where the confusion is that it's a multi-step process, and there's a lot of latitude given to our individual school districts, and in many cases the schools themselves, into how they implement these policies. Do you all have anything to next question, how do schools that have recess before lunch handle the hand washing activity? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know school nurses, I think, really struggle with this issue because hand washing is such an important, especially in elementary schools. What some, some school districts and schools have done is put a Purell station outside the lunchroom, so as kids are walking into the lunchroom, they may squirt some Purell on their hands and be able to eat lunch with clean hands, or they maybe take a few minutes to let kids go to the sink and wash their hands. But that's a great question, and that kind of needs to get incorporated also into thinking about the scheduling and the timing of the lunch line.
Great, thanks. Next question, in small rural Colorado, many of our students play multiple sports. Would this time count towards their 600 minutes per month? Kyle?
Actually, that would not count. It's great for students to participate in after-school sports and after-school activities that are physically active, and it's great for schools or their community partners to offer those activities to students. However, this law specifically focuses on physical activity during the school day. So that's the time between when students first arrive at school and classes begin in the morning and when they're actually dismissed at the end of the day. So the 600 minutes in your case would need to actually occur in that window of the school day. So anything that schools do to provide other physical activity opportunities and support the community in providing physical activity opportunities to children above and beyond that is great, and we absolutely encourage them to do that. But they do still need to meet that minimum 600 minutes during the school day.
Thank you. We've got 2 more questions to go. If anybody's got more questions, please go ahead and send them in. Stephanie, can you identify some innovative programs that individual schools or districts have adopted recently to increase the quantity or quality of physical activity? There's an add-on, especially in response to this law. I think in response to this law, we're not going to see right away, and we'll be tracking. But if you could share some of the things.
Yeah, so the 3R program I think that Aurora is about to implement is innovative in that it works with the physical education teachers as well as the core curriculum teachers. So they're going to be using tools around assessments that can, like measuring fitness grams, that has some math strategies and some science concepts that also that the kids will have to be physically active to be able to measure those indicators. And so I think that's a really innovative program. There's school districts, for example, Buffalo School District, which is a very rural school district in the Northeast, has a program that incorporates pedometers with the teachers and the students where they can record the number of steps during the day, and there's some goals that they set, personal goals that they set, and they're able to monitor that over a long period of time, and it incorporates then some math and science skills as well. So there's some really interesting examples of programs out there, and I think in the coming months we'll definitely be collecting more information on what school districts and strategies that schools are using.
And I just want to remind you that this webinar will be archived on the LiveWell Colorado website, as well as some live links to the resources that we mentioned a few slides ago. And one of those resources from the National Association of Sport and Physical Education is a great compilation of tools and resources for school districts for implementing each of the types of physical activity that schools may use to satisfy the minute requirement. So they have resources specifically for making recess time better, or making physical education time better, or for classroom activity breaks and the like. So that's a great place to go. In terms of local Colorado examples, another great place to potentially connect to is the Colorado Health Foundation and some of their grantees for the physical education quality improvement grants, as well as their active play area grants and some of the innovative things that local schools are doing across the state. The Legacy Foundation has lots of great stories on their website through their awards program and other things of schools doing wonderful things across the state to promote physical activity during the school day. We'll also have our contact information up for you shortly on another slide, so you can get in touch with any of us directly. And then on the slide that's up right now, or was up right now, there's a note that we will actually be doing a second webinar about House Bill 1069. The focus of this webinar was about the actual policy changes that were happening at the state and then subsequently the local level. That second webinar will actually focus on resources and case examples of how schools from across the state are actually implementing recess, PE, and other things that can count towards physical activity requirements.
Great, thank you. You guys covered a lot there, so thanks. We have 2 more questions at this point, so you can keep them coming. We've got a little bit more time. One of the questions was asking if we have any articles that support the information presented in the webinar for further research. So I think Kyle just addressed a lot of that. And again, if you have a specific request in there, please forward your questions to any one of the 3 of us. Then the last question, is there an anticipated time frame for the state producing a draft policy guideline for drafting the district policy with wording, et cetera, so the model language?
That was so the state isn't going to have. You're talking about the state board.
Yeah.
Yeah, the state board is encouraged in the law to help school districts or schools be able to account for the physical activity minutes in their school performance framework report. And there isn't, I know that I think in order to be aligned with the new school year and implementing this in 2011, they'll need to work on that over the summer. But I don't think they actually have an anticipated date for when when that guidelines for the state board will be out. And then in terms of the draft language that that CASB will be producing, I think that's going to be coming out shortly as well in terms of wanting school districts to be able to work on these policies issues with the start of the new 2011-12 school year. So stay tuned for both the state board language as well as the CASB model language that will be coming out in advance of the 2011 school year.
And one thing to keep in mind for all of you advocates at the local level who are interested in working with your school district and school board on developing these new local physical activity policies, any model policy that CASB, the Colorado Association of School Boards, develops is really a guideline and framework for schools to use as a jumping off point to determine whether or not it really fits the way that their schools are structured and their local needs. So it's a starting place. It doesn't have to be an ending place, and schools can edit, adopt, and craft it to really meet what they want to do in their local schools to comply with this law.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, with that, I think we'll pass it over to Shannon for any last wrap-up.
Great, and as a few of the presenters mentioned, this webinar will be available on the LiveWell website, likely by first thing tomorrow, and then we also have it on the Legacy Foundation.
Yeah.
And it'll also be available on the Legacy Foundation website. If you do have any further questions following this webinar, please don't hesitate to contact any of today's presenters. Otherwise, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today.